Richerson. I'm a evolutionary biologist, ecologist by training, and early in my career I got interested in cultural evolution through, the story's a little too long to tell, but at any rate, for many years a colleague of mine, Rob Boyd, and I have been working on developing a theory of cultural evolution, and recently with our students and other colleagues we've been investigating a lot of different questions about cultural evolution and gene-culture coevolution, how over the long span of human evolution, cultural evolution has affected genetic evolution and vice versa. So there's been we think, an intricate evolutionary dance in which these two systems have interacted with one another. So the way I got interested in business was through thinking about the evolution of modern societies from simpler societies. So simpler societies are organized on a tribal level, a few hundred to a few thousand, sometimes a few 100,000 actually. People live in relatively egalitarian societies, and their lives are structured by social institutions, but they don't have the elaborate political system that we have. And after the invention of agriculture and the development of urban societies, we got the evolution of quite a bit more complicated societies with multiple institutions, an elaborate division of labor, often political hierarchy. And how did these things come about? The theory of human cooperation that we developed has an element of what we called tribal, we call it the tribal social instincts hypothesis, group selection at the tribal level. This is something Darwin proposed. It's much more likely that group selection comes through the action of tribal success and scale success and failure due to cultural characteristics rather than genetic characteristics. At least that's our idea. It's much easier to maintain a lot of variation between tribes and other organizations if the variation is cultural than if it's genetic. So a simple example of how the mechanism works, if a child becomes an immigrant to a community, they bring their genes with them, and if they stay and reproduce, their genes become part of the genes of their host community. But when kids are brought into a host society, immigrants come to modern societies, the kids very often adopt the culture of the host culture. They don't adopt the host genes; they adopt the host culture. And so, in some ways, cultures are protected from the diluting effect of migration in a way that genes can't be. So empirically, there's a lot more more cultural variation between nations today than there is genetic variation, neighboring nations particularly. So on this basis, we imagined that, and Darwin imagined that cooperation arose in these tribal scale societies, and then that the social institutions of culture impacted genes. So if people were too mean to follow the rules, they got exiled, maybe killed. Today, we take people who can't follow society's rules and we put them in jail, where they tend to have fewer children than they otherwise would. So gene culture coevolution, in the sense of social selection, cultural institutions selecting against genotypes that can't participate in modern kinds of societies, is an ongoing evolutionary process. So now, business, so that's the background. Businesses are something like tribes, right? They're a group of people with a common set of activities that comprise firms, of course, come in all sizes, from a handful of people to very large organizations. And they compete with one another, and they succeed and fail on the basis of their ability to sell products or services to other people. And business failures are common, right? So group selection on business organizations is probably a very strong and ongoing evolutionary process. We all know the companies that failed or had to radically reorganize themselves to avoid failing. Pennies is still in its death throes, as I seem to remember reading in a business section of the newspaper just the other day. General Motors almost died during the recent economic troubles, and so on it goes. New firms enter and succeed, and old firms eventually die. I think there's, if I remember reading a month or so ago, there's one Italian bank that's one of the oldest business organizations still extant. It's 500 years old and about to die of bankruptcy because it's been mismanaged lately. So this is an ongoing dynamic. And from an applied point of view, we might be able to help businesses succeed and work better by pointing out to them the kinds of things that have historically led to the demise of businesses and led other businesses to be successful. One of the ones that interests me is how to manage personnel. The ancient tribe was essentially a cooperative business, right? Its only product was the services that it provided its own members, and most of these tribes were egalitarian, and many of them were quite successful at providing benefits for their members, and of course they were competing to provide more benefits and better life than competing tribes. Tribes can go extinct. There's a wonderful example of the Gibusi in lowland New Guinea, when the anthropologists who studied them contacted them, they were in the process of shrinking away and going extinct, and they had a pathological belief that all deaths were caused by witchcraft, and they had a very elaborate witchcraft accusation system, and about a third of the deaths in this society were due to witchcraft killings. They had a little formal judicial process by which they collected evidence and discovered that people were acting as witches, and then they caused them to be executed. It turned out that at the margin of the society, people had friends and intermarried with a neighboring group that didn't have this practice, and so everybody who had the opportunity to be a Bedamini, that was the other ethnic group, any excuse to get out of the Gibusi and into the Bedamini was taken up. So not only were they killing large numbers of people, but people were leaking across the boundary into the other society, getting the hell out of Dodge. And the business equivalent of that is not far to seek. When companies are in trouble, employees start looking for employment someplace else, right? They don't wait for the end if they're smart. And of course, the smartest people probably go first. The ones who see the handwriting on the wall and are good employees and have attractive opportunities elsewhere vote with their feet and weaken the company that is already in trouble and still further. And pretty soon there's nothing left but the turkeys, and the business goes down. So preventing that kind of thing is important. Sometimes businesses do desperate things. They hire executives that are supposed to help turn the business around. And it's my perception, I don't know if there's any good scholarship on this, that many people who advertise themselves as saviors of firms in trouble are really just pirates out to loot the last strong box in this poor firm. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there. I think Darwinian processes are alive and well in the business world, and applied evolution is essentially, you can think of applied evolution as in the broadest sense, is trying to give advice to avoid natural selection. Natural selection is the evolutionary force we want to avoid. We want to avoid going extinct. We want to avoid dying, and we want to have practices that change business organizations or our own behavior as far as that goes in ways that prevent us from suffering natural selection.